You know,
That's a very strong statement.
I mean, don't you think, Mike, that DPW is already doing peer review?
No. No, it came up in a recent application where DPW admitted on the record that they do not have the staff to actually review these projects. They would like to do it, but they don't have the staff to do it. They don't have the time. So they do a very quick overview, but the idea that our DPW is doing the equivalent of a peer review of a traffic study is not relevant.
And we saw that with Washington Village. Remember, there was like not a lot of answers. They couldn't come back. They barely looked at some things. I mean, you did see that they didn't have the time or the dedication to actually even look at that project that we just.
Yeah, and it's not. I don't blame DPW.
We don't blame DPW. Yeah.
They're short of a civil engineer, and they're completely overworked.
So, like, say Washington Village, for example. Right, the study was done, and you hired another engineer to do. Would that engineer be required to do a full-blown traffic study?
No.
Is he going to do a 10-page
survey?
No.
All they will do is review. It's peer review. So just like architectural review that redevelopment already does on redevelopment projects, they send a 3-page letter usually with bullet points, and they say this all checked out, this checked out, maybe the brick is too thin or something.
But in the traffic case, it said they did it on the correct day, they didn't do it on a holiday.
Yeah, it's not a big complicated thing, and it's not going to take a long time. Basically, they will go through and they will make sure that the traffic study is actually did not miss anything.
So you think that a 10-page study is going to give you more information?
Well, what I think will happen is a lot like what happened with the blight ordinance when it was enacted. It was not perfect, but what it's done is through deterrence, it has actually made people fix their blighted properties. And in this case, I mean, maybe that's a stretch, but the fact that peer review exists in Norwalk will make a developer who's going to do a traffic study, not that they would want to do it or cut corners, but they will realize they are subject to potential peer review. They will make sure all their I's are dotted and their T's are crossed. And in some way, just the mere existence of this regulation will sort of ensure that what we're getting is quality traffic studies where maybe unscrupulous developers might say, let's smooth over the numbers so that we're not covering all the bases.
Michael Galante, his caliber.
I didn't suggest anybody. I didn't name any names.
Right.
I said there are a million engineers out there.
Unscrupulous is kind of a really big term.
Let me give you a good example of this outside of zoning, because as an appraiser, we get peer reviews. So if we go and appraise a $2 million house or a $5 million commercial building, basically the lender or whoever's buying the loan will do a review of it. There's nothing wrong with it, but you know what it does? The good appraisers have already been all held accountable. The ones that are kind of mediocre or you're not 100, it just makes them one step more accurate or one step more on top of their game and one step more to like realize they're not getting paid by the developer or the attorney, but there's actually going to be somebody actually looking at the work. There's really nothing wrong with that.
Let's make a suggestion. We get Westport's regulation, Darien regulation, and see what they do, and then
the staff have looked at that, and the language is very simple.
We haven't seen it.
No, I'm just saying that I'm just telling everyone. And the language is very simple, and it basically covers not just traffic studies, but other areas that peer review are possible. They basically have a checklist. And
but in this case, you're just going for traffic.
Yes, I think that
the other two do any type of development. It could be an engineering study, or wetlands, or drainage.
Oh.
And it's not slowing those towns down because they're cranking stuff out left and right. I mean, Darien's.
Well, I talked with the Westport planner about one they had most recently done, and they did a traffic study for the Westport line.
No, I was saying if you're concerned that it'll slow us down by, I didn't say we weren't moving, I was saying that it won't slow us down. I don't
Okay.
think it'll slow anything
It
down.
would impact people, though, if I'm reading this correctly, that existing permitted uses, any increase in development size for an existing use?
Yes.
And any change of use, so in Rowayton, if you change from a retail to a restaurant, you'd have to do a traffic study?
Yes.
Okay.
No, I don't think so.
But-
Yeah,
But-
it says significant change in use.
Depends on what, you need a.
It says significant change in use from that
But it
previous.
says any increase in development size, to any.
So in Inverway, somebody wants to move into the soy
Yes,
building.
well, this is based on best practices around the country.
Okay.
And again,
I just wanted to-
Norwalk taxpayers paid $500,000 for a study that.
No, who has it? Sanford, Darien, Westport?
Yes.
Stanford
But
doesn't have
it's
to.
saying
But
a
we're talking about-
minimum size, it's not making you do it on every small little business. It's
Okay, we
saying
need to set a limit.
minimum
If we ever
20,000.
do, go on with this. We need to
Yeah.
set a limit on square footage or,
Well, it says new development's 20,000, existing is any increase.
Yes.
existing, it has to be a limit
I think
on
Well,
it.
that's
that
a
would be
little,
really
I think that's a
prohibitive for small
little,
businesses.
Well, we can look at
Brutal.
that, but
I
the.
don't think that's right.
The study says the purpose of these guidelines is to establish procedures and protocols to ensure consistency of analysis and the adequacy of information presented. It's a really, hold on
To
a
me,
second.
that's a new business, that's a business that, you know,
Michael, you know what,
that
maybe
could
we
be a
can get you
business
this,
killer. I mean,
this chapter, rather than just this exhibit.
Yes,
Maybe
and I'm-
explain
and
it
I'm-
a little bit.
And I'm just want to stress that a professional planning firm with a national reputation reviewed our existing regulations and called them generic and of limited usefulness. And when someone says that is a professional planning firm looks at our regulations and says they're of limited usefulness and generic, and that we should go to what they call best practices after studying a nationwide firm, I don't know why we have to fight that. Well, I don't know why we're so unique that we should have regulations that are generic and of limited usefulness.
That's what they said.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
and that's a firm that the taxpayers paid $500,000.
But Mike, I mean, here, I kind of gasp when I read any increase in development size for an existing permitted use. That just seems to me to be a bit draconian. I mean,
Well, how
if
many
you're gonna do
increases in
it,
development size do we have? I don't think we have that many.
you're sort of saying, it doesn't matter, we don't care. Anything you do, we're gonna make sure you redo your traffic study, which I think is a little harsh.
Well, one of the things.
I mean, you could do it based on a percentage of the increase of the size, a 50% increase in size.
Well, we can talk about that.
You
I
know,
think there's lots.
I think the word any is way too,
You know, I agree with you. And I think
Way
like
too tough.
a good
Yeah.
example of this, and you know, I love my Starbucks, but a good example of this is a peer review probably wouldn't have been a bad idea to do on, you know, a case like that with a traffic study, because it's like in a very busy location, you're thinking of changing an intersection, it's in a busy parking lot, it's a drive-through, you know. That might be a perfect example of where you might want.
well,
Okay,
if
I
you were,
understand.
if you were
It's
changing
getting-
curb cuts, I
getting
could
late.
see it, but if it's already in the parking
Okay.
lot, I don't think
The
it
year is
applies.
out, we need
It's where
to
you're really
keep on discussing
interrupting with
it,
the
right?
road, or, I think,
We wanna talk
then,
about
yes,
next
I
month.
would agree with you.
Well, do we have a consensus that that are,
But I think
I'm
it's
sorry.
more of a safety issue when you're doing major roads and curb cuts and all that, because we've had those discussions.
do we have a consensus that we should consider peer review and looking at the parameters of our traffic studies and use these recommendations
Well, no.
as a guideline, but considering that
No question. I
that
mean,
some of them.
The
As long as
the peer review sounds the most interesting. The rest of it,
Well, I don't know why a national planning firm would go out of their way to say that our current regulations are
Mike,
generic and of limited
I
usefulness.
think your point of using this as a guideline is the way it was meant to be used in the first place. So there's nothing wrong with us continuing the dialogue about these parameters. I do think the peer review makes a lot of sense.
it seems to, we'll have to look at it.
But we don't want to overregulate either. You don't want to swing 100% the other way either. So there's got to be some negotiation in the middle. So I think it's a good place to start with the peer review, but considering the other things like the 20,000 square foot for new development, I think that makes sense. But again, I mean, this is one authority, it's not the only authority. And we also have to use common sense of what we know about Norwalk and say, okay, are the current regulations prohibiting businesses from coming in the first place? And how much more regulation do we want to add on top of that?
Well,
So we just have to be mindful of those things
Yes.
before we jump in.
I agree.
That's my worry.
I agree, and I just want to make it clear that our regulations require traffic studies on most of these projects already.
Totally understand.
All
Yeah.
this does is increase on certain applications, on certain developments, increases the geographic area to include intersections of 25 or more, that are impacted of 25 or more cars per peak hour. So that you will then, let's say, let's pick a project on Main Avenue, for instance, none in particular, but let's just pick a project on Main Avenue. You would then look,
Oh, gee.
well,
Which one is that?
it's recent news, so I think we can talk about it. There's potentially a lot of projects on that street, and there's a lot of properties. There's 140 existing businesses. So any particular project would not just do what our current regulations say right in front of the main avenue, but would consider Silvermine and Cranberry, because the intersections that would be impacted with 25 or more cars per peak hour are intersections up Aiken Street and West Hills, are into Perry Avenue and Silvermine Avenue, intersections that are busy already, and where people have major concerns about developments on Main Avenue and how they might affect them. So you are actually, instead of someone guessing over what the traffic study should be, because right now it's kind of a subjective idea, we basically have regulations that say, well, if your project is over 20,000 square feet, we need to include all intersections with 25 or more cars per peak hour, that's all. And it doesn't cover all new projects. I think the one about the existing projects with any increase, that does seem
I just think that's
draconian. I would agree with you.
So we'll get you language on what the other towns are using for peer review. We'll let you look at this. We'll get you the chapter that directly relates to this.
Yes.
Distribute that, and you can take a look at it.
Yeah, and we all would have good feedback on it, I think. And then,
Yeah, I just want to comment on traffic studies, because I do think, like, we should not minimize them. I was actually on the common council when we approved that $500,000, and there were a lot of people, and Doug Hempstead was leading the charge on it, about the relevance of these studies and how, like, all the different groups should, when it comes back, look at it, apply it, and, you know, I do think we have a responsibility to sort of take a look at them and see if we need to reform or keep up with them, because that was one of the biggest fights to get the $500,000 approved, and I can go back and pull the newspaper clippings for you in the minutes if you want to see them. I'm sure I have them somewhere.
Okay.
the